and out. And just repeat that for a couple of times. This allows your nervous system to know that you are safe. Now, I've done this more for me than for you because I get a bit nervous standing up in front of people. So bear with me. I'm here to change the narrative, to move away from labelling teenagers as having behavioural problems. And instead, I want to look through a lens of nervous system regulation, recognising their signals that their bodies are clearly giving us. Because when we learn to regulate ourselves, our teens can co-regulate with us. And from that place of safety, they build confidence and develop the ability to regulate themselves. This is my mission, to support parents to understand that there is another way, and through that to open the conversations wider into schools, into mental health services, and into the systems that support our young people in every day. So last year I presented, as Sean said, at the Scholars Conference in Amsterdam on the efficacy of the Jing method on adults with asthma and anxiety. So this got me looking at posture, anxiety, and how that impacts on us. Because I've treated many adults throughout their life, but I'm seeing the end results of potentially what's happened in their life as a child. So more recently, through my body of clinical work and personal experience as a parent, this has evolved into supporting overwhelmed adolescents and their families, which is how I developed the teen regulation method. And my approach bridges neurophysiology, the brain-gut connection, and the relational co-regulation, offering body-based frameworks that complement psychology and therapeutic care. Because we know this, the brain builds neural pathways through repetition, and it is this foundation that regulation is formed. And this matters because adolescence is a period of profound change, biologically, socially, and neurologically. Research by Sarah Jane Blakemore highlights that many mental health conditions, including anxiety, depression, and eating disorders, first emerge before the age of 24. And adolescence also is a critical time for developing social understanding, relationships, and emotional processing. But many of our young people missed key parts of this developmental stage during the pandemic. Their social worlds were disrupted, connection became through screens, and relationships became distant. And many of those developmental experiences were paused or lost. So what we are now seeing post-pandemic is a rise in adolescent dysregulation, increased anxiety, emotional volatility, shutdowns and withdrawal, and even school refusal. Many of these young people have nervous systems that have not yet downshifted, and they do not feel safe. They are operating in survival mode. And here is the key point. They don't need more instruction. They need support to feel safe. And that begins with the regulated adult in the room, whether that's a teacher, a parent, or a practitioner. We become the environment their nervous system responds to. They're reading our tone, our posture, our behaviour before they listen to any of the words that we say to land. So this isn't a parenting strategy talk, you'll be relieved to know, and it's not about behaviour modification. This is about a nervous system first framework. So what we are seeing in teens right now is both from a personal lived experience and shared stories from clients I work with. Emotional explosions, rage, something like slammed doors, shouting, screaming. Withdrawal, shutdown, where they dive under the duvet, refuse to come out of the bedroom, don't want to join in at meal times. Or worst case scenarios, we've had suicide attempts. Anxiety and hypervigilance, so perceived threat is heightened. catastrophizing, but it's very real for the child itself. Somatic systems, so gut issues, IBS, headache, fatigue, they want to sleep all day. Pain, it's idiopathic, but GPs can't find a reason why they're feeling what they're feeling. These are physiological stress responses, not behavioural choices. So over the past decade in clinical practice, working through the biopsychosocial lens, which a lot of us have touched on over the last couple of days, I have consistently observed patterns that are also well documented in the work of Bessel van der Kolk, The Body Keeps the Score. You may have read the book. And more recently, we've seen and heard Gabor Mate giving lots of talks. Their research, alongside my own experience, highlights that many of the symptoms we experience are not random or purely physical. They are deeply connected to how we relate to the world, to others, and to ourselves. Our sense of self-worth, the level of care we offer ourselves, and the environments we are exposed to all shape on how our nervous systems responds. These responses in turn influence our behaviours. The internal narrative we hold, how we speak to ourselves, literally shapes our neural pathways, affecting not only behaviour, but also posture, self-perception, and ultimately our overall health and experience of dis-ease. So my work with clients focuses on releasing what I often describe as the tricky stories held in the tissues within the body, life's accumulated souvenirs stored in those soft tissues. As these physical tensions begin to ease, it is not uncommon for an emotional release to follow, whether that's tears, laughter, or a quiet realization that the pain that they've been holding is connected to an earlier experience, whether that's a childhood fall, an accident, or a significant life event such as a divorce, a relocation, or a loss. This is why supporting our children and teens to develop self-regulation from an early age is so vital. When they learn how to understand and regulate their nervous system, they gain the ability to pause, process, and respond to life's challenges, rather than react from a place of overwhelm. It is often within these reactive moments that consequences arise, creating a ripple effect or a domino effect of outcomes that don't reflect the person they truly are. By building regulation, we give them something far more powerful than coping. We give them a choice. The gap in current support is an over-reliance on cognitive and behavioural approaches, limited integration of body-based and nervous system regulation tools. Parents are often unsupported, or worse, blamed, or they blame themselves. In my work, many parents have shared experiences of being held responsible for their child's lack of school attendance. Yet, when a child is so anxious and overwhelmed, simply leaving the house becomes a significant milestone. We are no longer looking at defiance, we are looking at severe nervous system dysregulation. It is not possible to reason with a nervous system that is stuck in survival mode. Before logic can be effective, we must first establish a sense of safety without placing blame on the parent for what is, in reality, a physiological response. And in many of these situations, parents are already doing their best, doing everything they can to encourage, support, and try and meet all the expectations, often while carrying their own stress and pressure. The heightened state of this heightened state of the parent is then unintentionally felt by the child, reinforcing the cycle of dysregulation. Then when additional pressures are introduced, for example, the attendance officers from the school show up on your doorstep unannounced, it can then further activate the parent's already heightened nervous system, increasing the stress hormones and perpetuating an already heightened state of survival for both parent and child. Until we address the root cause, the nervous system's need for safety, we will continue to focus on the symptom rather than the solution. So therefore, as the adult, we need to be able to regulate so our teens can regulate from us, called mirroring or co-regulation. The autonomic nervous system, so the parasympathetic is the rest and digest, and the sympathetic is stress, the stress response, the fight, flight, freeze mode, which is the polyvagal theory that's developed by Dr. Stephen Porges. Adolescence is a period of significant neurodevelopmental change. During this stage, there is a heightened activation in the limbic system, particularly within the brain's reward centres, such as the ventral striatum and the amygdala, while the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for impulse control, decision making and rational thinking, is still maturing. So there's a gap. So this developmental imbalance, combined with hormonal changes, contributes to more emotional experiences. So this increased sensation seeking and a heightened sensitivity towards social feedback. As a result, adolescents can appear more reactive, not because of choice or defiance, but because their brains are still under construction. Alongside these brain-based changes, the autonomic nervous system is also developing. Research by Hartveld et al. On the maturation of the cardiac autonomic nervous system activity demonstrates that the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system branches follow different developmental trajectories. The parasympathetic activity shows a fluctuation, not a linear pattern with a plateau during middle childhood, while the sympathetic nervous system activity gradually decreases from early childhood into young adulthood. So together, these findings highlight that adolescence is not simply a behavioural phase, but a complex interplay of neurological and physiological development, further reinforcing the need to support young people through a nervous system informed lens. And there is a growing body of research, thankfully on PubMed, highlighting the impact of cumulative stress on adolescent well-being. What we are often seeing is not a single issue, but a layering of experiences. So over time, become overwhelming to a developing nervous system. So for example, our teens navigating trauma. So that's their emotional response and reaction. This can be from a relationship breakup, conflict with parents, exclusions from school, micro-stressors, so disagreements with friends, poor test results, forgotten homework, or just missing the bus. Social pressure, where that's expectations about dating, kissing, vaping, alcohol and drug use. And the digital load, an area widely debated and often misunderstood. Highlighted in research by Dinlan and Johannes in 2020, when assessing the effects of technology use on adolescent well-being, one of the best answers is that it's complicated. So digital technology is not inherently good or bad, and young people actively engage with it, often with a high level of competency. While there are cases where its impact may be negative, the broader evidence suggests we should remain thoughtful but not alarmist. Alongside this, many adults, parents and carers are themselves under significant strain, stress, burnout, exhaustion, and for many mothers, the added impact of perimenopause during this same life stage. From this place, self-regulation becomes more challenging, yet it is exactly what is needed most. Children do not just hear what we say, they feel how we are. So if I'm standing here going, "You're fine," it's not really going to come across very well, is it? So they read us, they feel us. Then we've got the brain-gut connection. Most of us probably think that the majority comes from the brain down to the gut. In fact, it's the other way round. Around 80% of the signalling travels from the gut to the brain, and only 20% from the brain to the gut. The vagus nerve is the primary pathway in this system, a bidirectional highway carrying information between the gastrointestinal tract and the brain. It plays a key role in that communication, regulating digestion, immune function, mood, and our response to stress. This means the state of the gut has direct and powerful influence on how we feel and regulate, and how we think. When the body is underfueled and dysregulated or stressed, the brain follows. So we see this in everyday life. I know when I'm hungry, I really struggle to focus. I don't get hangry like I did when I was a teenager, but if my husband's got something to tell me, he often has to wait till I'm sure that I'm fueled, I've eaten. The body, the gut comes first. The brain, when the body is okay, the brain can engage. So regulation precedes reasoning. You cannot talk a nervous system out of survival mode. You must first support it back into safety. We need to model the state we want to see in our children. When we become more regulated, they begin to co-regulate with us, reducing the intensity of their stress responses over time, aligning with the principles of the polyvagal theory, as mentioned earlier, Stephen Porges. So parents as co-regulators. At the heart of all of this is one key truth. Teens cannot learn to regulate themselves in isolation. And this is where often the system gets it wrong. We expect young people whose brains are still developing, whose nervous systems are highly sensitive, to just calm down, just behave, or just think differently. But regulation is not something we're born knowing how to do alone. It is something we learn through relationship. Before a child can self-regulate, they must first experience co-regulation. Excuse me. Which means they borrow our calm before they can create their own. So when a teen is overwhelmed, anxious, shut down, or explosive, what they need in that moment is not more instruction, but a regulated nervous system in front of them. Because their nervous system is constantly asking one thing: am I safe? What about the parents? The parents I work with are not failing. They are often exhausted and navigating their own burnout, helplessness, fear, hypervigilance, and self-blame. They are trying to hold everything together while being told to get their child into school, be more consistent, set more boundaries, all while their own nervous systems is under constant strain. And from that place, regulation is incredibly hard. So we need a reframe. This is not about managing behaviour, this is about stabilising physiology, because behaviour is simply the expression of what is happening in the nervous system. When we shift our focus from how do we stop this behaviour to how do I create safety in this moment, everything changes. And here's the empowering part. When a parent begins to regulate themselves, even slightly, the teen begins to feel it. Not because they're being told, but because they are wired to mirror it. This is how change happens, not through control, not through connection, but not through force, not through control, but through connection, not through force, but through felt safety. So instead of asking, how do I get my teen to behave differently, we begin to ask, what state am I bringing to this interaction? Because that is where regulation begins. And from past experience, there is a moment almost like crossing a bridge between childhood and adolescence. One day your child wants to be with you, hang out with you, talk to you, play games with you, do crafts, and you feel deeply connected. And then gradually things begin to shift. They start to pull away. They want independence. They want to work things out for themselves. And as a parent, I found myself trying to hold on to what we'd had. To keep things the same way they were. But life's not like that. People change, so do we, and we grow. In reality, something is always changing. And with that change can come a real sense of grief. A quiet loss of what once was, and uncertainty about what comes next. Because the truth is, we don't always cross the bridge at the same time as our teens. They're already stepping into the next phase, while we're still standing on the other side wondering how we actually got here. And no one hands you a manual how to navigate from that transition, how to stay connected, and how to meet them in this new space. So I've taken everything I've learned through my work, through the science, and through my own experience, and created a way to support parents to crossing the bridge. Not to go back, but to move forward, to reconnect with their child, their teen, in a way that works for who they are becoming. So the teen regulation method. Everything I've shared leads to this. I began to realise that what is missing wasn't more information or more strategies. It wasn't more ways to manage behaviour. What was missing was a framework, a way of understanding what is actually happening in the body and the nervous system, and then knowing what to do about it. So this is where the teen regulation comes in. It brings together everything we've been talking about, the science, the lived experience, and the practical tools. And it integrates 4 key elements: the body, the senses, the relationship, and the understanding. Because when we work together, when we work with all of these all together, that's when change becomes possible. And at the heart of this method, a few core principles. They're simple but powerful: safety before strategy, body before cognition, rhythm, repetition, and predictability, and importantly, parent and teen regulation together. This is not something we expect a young person to do alone. It happens within relationship. What it looks like is nervous system education, body-based regulation tools, breath, voice, rhythm and movement, somatic grounding techniques, and importantly, supporting parents with their own regulation skills. What's really important to understand is this: we're not aiming for perfection. We're not trying to eliminate stress completely, because that's not realistic. What changes first is something much more meaningful. We begin to see a reduction in intensity, quicker recovery after overwhelm, and more moments when communication becomes possible, that connection with your child. And gradually there is an increased sense of safety within the home, that felt safety. And when safety increases, everything becomes easier. Conversations land, connection returns, confidence begins to build in both the teen and the parent. This isn't about fixing a child. It's about understanding nervous system and supporting it in the way it was always meant to be supported. So what I'm beginning to observe through this work are not dramatic overnight transformations, but something much more meaningful and much more sustainable. In the early stages, what we are seeing are shorter escalations. So it doesn't last for days and hours after there's been an argument or slamming of doors, or increased self-awareness in teens, so they actually recognise when they're starting to feel overwhelmed or a bit anxious, and they voice it. And that in itself is a huge shift, and importantly, parents reporting more confidence and calm. Not because everything is fixed, but because they begin to understand what's happening and feel more equipped to respond. And this brings us into an important point. What does success actually look like? Because it's not perfect behaviour. We know that doesn't exist, and there's no point striving for it. We need to remove that word, right? It's not a household with no conflict, no emotion, or no challenge. Success looks like increased capacity to regulate. It looks like recovering more quickly, navigating difficult moments with more awareness. So if there's an exam coming up, you know that exam is coming up. You know you're going to feel a bit nervous about it. Try and switch that conversation, have that conversation. So we work alongside these systems, supporting the nervous system in a way that allows those other interventions to be more effective. Because when the body feels safe, the brain can engage, and when the brain can engage, that's when real lasting change becomes possible. For me personally, this has looked like something quite simple but deeply meaningful. It's the regular dialogue I now have with my daughters. There was a time that was really, really tricky. They've set me up on Snapchat, so I meet them on their level. We send daft pictures to each other every day now. They've invited me into their world, and in doing so, they've helped me learn how to meet them on their level. And what I've noticed is this: the atmosphere in our home shifted dramatically, especially when I stopped focusing on the behaviour and started tuning into what their nervous system was actually needing. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect. I don't always get it right. But when I am regulated, the difference is powerful. It changes how I respond, it changes how they respond, and it changes the entire dynamic between us. And that, for me, has been increasingly empowering. Not just as a practitioner, but as a parent, because the truth is, my daughters have taught me just as much as I've supported them. They haven't just been a part of this journey, they have helped shape this work. So looking at this from a broader perspective, there is a growing case for nervous system first approaches to be given greater attention, not instead of existing models, but alongside them. Because what we are seeing is this: when the nervous system is supported first, other interventions, whether cognitive, behavioural or therapeutic, have a far greater chance of landing. So this has potential implications across several areas. Within mental health services, it invites us to consider how regulation is supported before or alongside traditional therapeutic approaches, particularly when working with highly dysregulated adolescents. Within education settings, with the teachers, and within family-based interventions. And for longitudinal outcomes, what happens over time, parent-teen dyadic regulation, and the role of somatic body-based approaches within adolescent care. And on the 7th of April, I'm rolling out a workshop, and in the middle of April, I'm rolling out a beta launch to work with a few families to go into this work deeper. It will include weekly coaching sessions, creating space for check-ins, shared experiences, and celebrating progress, alongside structured workbooks to help families track where they begin, what they're learning, and to build gentle accountability along the way. My last slide. Nearly there. So just to bring this together, the core message is this: dysregulation is not defiance, it is physiological. Regulation is not something we expect, it is something that can be learned. And importantly, parents are not the problem, they are a vital part of the solution. When we shift our lens in this way, we move from frustration to understanding and meaningful change. When we learn to return to ourselves, we give our children permission to do the same. Thank you for listening.